What would you sacrifice for power, your soul, your honor, or your humanity? You stand in a silent chamber lit by torches. On one side stands Niccolò Machiavelli, whispering from Renaissance Florence, the man who told princes that mercy is weakness and fear is sharper than love. On the other side, Napoleon Bonaparte, the Corsican thunderbolt who conquered half of Europe not only with cannons but with the force of his myth. Both men understood influence, not as a gentle art of persuasion, but as a weapon, a dangerous fire to be bent, wielded, and feared. Carl Jung once said, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking." But here lies the paradox. Can love and power ever truly coexist, or must one always crush the other? You are about to enter their duel of ideologies. Machiavelli teaches you the cold calculus of survival. Betray when necessary, manipulate appearances, and hold fear above affection. Napoleon, however, shows you the intoxicating spell of charisma, the ability to turn men into zealots who march into death for your vision. These are not dusty lessons locked in history books. They are laws, rarely understood, but constantly alive in politics, business, relationships, even in your own silent choices. To ignore them is to risk being ruled by those who mastered them. Welcome to Legend's Legacy, where history breathes and the minds of giants are unchained. If you feel the pull of these ancient fires, subscribe and stand with us. Share your thoughts in the comments. Whose path do you find more compelling? The cold realism of Machiavelli or the burning charisma of Napoleon? The stage is set. The first law of influence is about to be revealed. Power is not given. It is taken, shaped, and held with bloodied hands. You stand at the crossroads of two visions of influence. On one side, Machiavelli, the Florentine exile, whispers from his prison of disillusion. Influence begins with control of perception. He tells you rulers are not loved for who they are, but for what they appear to be. To be merciful when it costs nothing, to be cruel when survival demands it. His voice cuts like a knife. Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. But fear, he insists, is more reliable. Across the field, Napoleon's presence burns with an entirely different force. His soldiers called him the god of war, but his true mastery was not just military, it was psychological. He walked among his men, touched their shoulders, remembered their names, and filled them with the belief that they marched not for a general, but for destiny. His magnetism seduced entire nations. Where Machiavelli crafted fear, Napoleon ignited devotion. You feel the pull of both currents. One, cold and calculating, safety through suspicion. The other, fiery and intoxicating, victory through belief. Both are dangerous. Machiavelli's shadow can harden your heart until you trust no one. Napoleon's fire can blind you with illusions, until ambition consumes everything. Nietzsche once warned, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." Influence is not innocent. The seduction of power demands payment, and that payment is often your humanity. But to understand their laws fully, you must first see why people obey at all. What force, fear, or reverence binds humans to leaders? That is the second law, and it will draw you deeper into their world. Obedience is rarely born of reason. It is born of emotion, of awe, of fear. You stand in a battlefield after the cannons fall silent. The air smells of smoke and blood. Around you, men remain loyal even as corpses line the ground. Why? What keeps human beings bound to another's will? Machiavelli's answer is merciless. Fear. He insists that men are fickle, driven by self-interest, quick to betray love when it costs them. But fear holds. Fear chains the soul more tightly than affection. He writes with cruel clarity, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if you have to choose." His law is survival, secure obedience through dread, not devotion. But Napoleon's truth burns in contrast. His soldiers adored him, cried at his defeats, followed him into hopeless battles. His presence created reverence, almost worship. He said, "A soldier will fight long and hard for a bit of colored ribbon." He understood that reverence transforms obedience into something greater. Men no longer obey simply out of fear, they believe. And belief, when ignited, makes men endure hunger, death, and endless war. So here you stand, torn between two poles. Fear creates control, but it breeds resentment. Reverence inspires devotion, but it risks delusion. Leaders throughout history have chosen one, the other, or both, weaving fear with reverence into a single chain. Sigmund Freud once warned, "Most people do not really want freedom, because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility." That fear is why they obey. That hunger for guidance is why they revere. You now see the second law. Influence thrives only when it roots itself in the human heart's twin shadows, dread and worship. But how do leaders manipulate these shadows? The answer lies in appearances, in masks, in theater. Reality is often powerless. It is the illusion of reality that conquers. You stand in a grand hall. Velvet banners hang from the walls, golden light dances across marble, and every gesture, every word, every silence is calculated. This is not mere politics, it is theater. Machiavelli knew this well. He warns you, rulers cannot afford to be truly virtuous, only to appear so. Justice, mercy, piety, these are costumes. To rule is to perform. He writes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." His third law of influence is clear. Mask your flaws, project strength, and never allow your mask to slip. A ruler's survival depends not on truth, but on the illusion of truth. Napoleon mastered this theater with devastating brilliance. He staged his own myth, not as a man, but as a legend. He allowed portraits to depict him as taller than he truly was, surrounded himself with symbols of Rome and empire, and carefully curated stories of his victories, even when those victories were partial truths. His soldiers did not just fight for Napoleon the man, they fought for Napoleon the myth. And you see it still, in politics, in business, in the world around you. Masks dominate reality. Charisma outweighs competence. Appearances rule the stage, while truth quietly suffocates behind the curtain. Oscar Wilde once said, "Man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give him a mask, and he will tell you the truth." But here, the mask does not reveal, it deceives. And yet, the deception works. The theater of appearances seduces, but beneath the velvet curtain lies the most dangerous law of all: trust, betrayal, and the fragile currency that binds them. Every throne is built on bones of trust, and every empire collapses when that trust shatters. You stand in the dim light of a war tent. Maps are scattered across the table, but it is not the lines on parchment that determine fate, it is the loyalty of the men who hold the swords. Machiavelli is ruthless here. He warns you never to rely on loyalty as a permanent bond. People will betray when it serves their advantage. His advice: anticipate betrayal before it comes. He insists, the promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. For him, loyalty is a tool, not a virtue. Break it if survival demands. Napoleon, however, gambled on loyalty, and often won. His soldiers adored him, but generals and allies betrayed him when his star began to fade. Kings who once bent the knee abandoned him at Leipzig. Ministers who dined at his table later conspired against him. For Napoleon, loyalty was fire. It burned bright, but it consumed itself quickly. And so you confront the cruel paradox. Influence demands trust, yet power corrodes it. Too much trust, and you are betrayed. Too little, and you are isolated. Every leader walks this razor's edge. Shakespeare wrote in Julius Caesar, "Men are nearly always ready to betray one who has loved them too much." It is a law as old as humanity. Devotion invites treachery, and fear invites rebellion. The calculus of trust is a dangerous game. You must give just enough to bind, yet never so much that betrayal destroys you. This is the fifth law of influence, and it brings us to the inevitable end, when influence turns against its master, and empires crumble under their own weight. Every empire carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. You walk through the ruins of ambition. Broken statues of emperors lie in the dust, their faces eroded by time. Crowds that once cheered now spit upon their names. Influence, like fire, illuminates for a time, but always burns out. Machiavelli knew this truth intimately. Cast out of Florence, betrayed by the very politics he sought to master, he ended his life not as a feared advisor, but as a man forgotten, desperate to be remembered. His cold laws preserved rulers, but not himself. Influence gave him a voice, but abandoned him in silence. Napoleon's fall was more dramatic. From the thunder of cannons at Austerlitz to the bitter snows of Russia, his influence collapsed beneath its own weight. Betrayed by allies, abandoned by generals, mocked by the same people who once hailed him, he died on a lonely island, a prisoner of his own legend. The man who once ruled Europe now ruled nothing but memory. Here lies the final law of influence. It devours its wielder. The fear you inspire eventually poisons loyalty. The myth you construct eventually shatters under reality. The devotion you ignite eventually turns to resentment when your promise fades. Influence is powerful, but never eternal. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, left you a warning. The fame that you will have after your death will be like smoke, dissipating in the air. And so you stand here, surrounded by ghosts of power, forced to ask yourself, do you seek to control others, or to master yourself? For in the end, all external influence crumbles, but the legacy of wisdom endures. This is legend's legacy, where history speaks, and its shadows warn. Whose path speaks to you more deeply? The cold realism of Machiavelli, or the burning charisma of Napoleon? Share your thoughts below, and join us by subscribing, so you never walk this journey alone.